Welcome everyone to my online course for research methods in psychology. My name is Frank Losciavo and I will be your tour guide today. I have a few interesting things to show you, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. As you know, our first research project involves conducting a basic descriptive study about student anxiety and stress. And our ultimate goal is to communicate our findings by writing an APA-style research report. But first, we need to use jamovi to analyze the data that we've collected, and that's going to be the focus of this video. So one of the first things you're going to want to do is download and install jamovi. It is great software, and it's free, and I provide the directions right here. Then, from our course website, you need to download the Excel file that contains our survey data. Let me show you how to do that. The Excel file that we need is right here, Psych 2120 Project 1 data.xlsx. So that's an Excel file that contains all of the survey data that we've collected. We need to save that file to our hard drives so that we can then open it up and import it into jamovi. I'm going to right-click on my mouse and then select Save Link As. Depending on your web browser, your option might be labeled a little bit differently. Now I need to find a safe place on my hard drive to save this file. I've already downloaded it, so I'm just going to cancel out of this, but you would click Save. Now that we've downloaded the Excel data file to our hard drives, we want to open it inside of jamovi. So go to the hamburger menu and click, and then click on Open. Now browse your computer to find the file. My file is in my Downloads folder, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to find the file, and then I'm going to click on Open. And just like that, our data is now loaded in jamovi. Next, let's go ahead and save this jamovi data file. To do that, just go back to the hamburger menu, click on it, and then click on Save. Now, browse your computer and just find a safe place to save it. I'm going to save mine right here. I recommend naming the file Psych 2120 Project 1 Analyses, and all jamovi data files end in a .omv extension. So go ahead and save that. I already had a file with that name, so when I click Save, it's going to ask me if I want to replace it, and in this case, I do. As you're working, make sure you save that file periodically. All right, now that we have that file saved, let's format each variable with the appropriate attributes. But first, go back to your instructions and then scroll all the way down to the last page. And remind yourself of the questions that we asked on our survey. At the time that I'm making this video, our class has not yet decided exactly which questions to include in the survey, but the printed instructions that you have access to right now, they will list all of the questions that we included. So look at your instructions. One thing that you'll notice is that questions 2 through 11 are all structured similarly. For example, those questions use a 5-point scale that ranges from no anxiety stress to extreme anxiety stress. Within jamovi, we need to enter those value labels for each variable. It's important that we do this. It's important that we set up jamovi this way because then our output tables, they'll all be labeled and they'll be easy to read. So here we are back in jamovi. On the left side, you see our data window, and on the right side, that's where our results will be shown. So let's just scroll through the variables real quickly. This first variable, ID, just shows an ID for each individual respondent. We don't actually analyze that data. And then here we see question 2, all the way through question 11, like we were just talking about. Those were basic survey questions using that 5-point scale. Here's question 12. This was the question where we asked people their age. For question 13, we asked people about their gender, And for question 14, we asked people about their high school or college student status. Okay, I'm just using my arrow keys. I'm going to scroll all the way back to the left. There's nothing that we need to do to set up that ID variable. We'll just leave that as is. So let's start with question 2. I'm going to set it up as if the question was, as you think about yourself in school, please rate your typical level of anxiety and stress when completing an exam. Again, your questions will be a little bit different. Just look at your instructions and you'll see exactly what those questions are. So let's go ahead and set up question 2. The most straightforward way to do that is to go to the Data menu and then click on Setup. We don't need to set up this ID variable, so let's just hit this arrow key and move to question number 2. I recommend leaving these variable names the same so that we're all using the exact same variable names. But go ahead and click on Description and type in a brief description. That can be very helpful because then at a glance, you'll know what we asked for this question. Regardless of what you type in, I recommend keeping it relatively short. Really, this description that you type in is just for your own benefit because Jamovi, unfortunately, does not print these descriptions in the output. All right, let's go ahead and set up those value labels for the 5 potential responses from that 5-point response scale. I recommend that we all set them up the same way. So, for example, in our data set, if we see a 1, that means that the person put down that they have no anxiety or stress in this situation. If they put a 2, that means mild anxiety or stress. A 3 represents moderate anxiety or stress. 4, severe anxiety or stress. And 5, extreme anxiety or stress. So we'll just use those key words: no, mild, moderate, severe, and extreme. Again, it's wise to keep it short because this is actually printed in our output tables. And if you keep it short, it's easier to read the tables. So I'm going to come over here to the levels, and where it says 1, I'm going to click and then just type in no for no anxiety or stress. You can use your mouse and then just move over to section 2, and this would represent mild anxiety or stress. So I'm just going to type in mild. Another way that you can get to that next level is to use your tab key. So now I'm going to tab over to the next section. If we see a 3 in the data set, that represents moderate anxiety or stress. So I'm going to type in moderate. Then I'm going to tab and type in severe. And then tab one more time and type in extreme. If you're working on a variable and you don't see the numbers 1 through 5 listed by default, that just means somebody did not select one of those response options. We still want to include all those response options at this time. So if you needed to add something, you can just click on the plus sign. Now, here's an important detail. We do want to retain unused levels in analyses. So click this so that it turns it on. With that option selected, our frequency distribution tables will show a row for each one of those response options, even if nobody selected one of those response options. So for example, for this question, if nobody listed extreme stress, the frequency distribution table will still have a line for extreme stress, but it'll just show that 0% of the respondents selected it. Now, while we're here setting up this variable, let's also set the measurement type and the data type. Let's click on measurement type and see what our options are. You might recall that each variable can use one of 4 different measurement scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. In this situation, interval or ratio are both classified as continuous. Questions 2 through 11 all used that 5-point scale ranging from no stress to extreme stress. So really, that response scale is best classified as ordinal. So go ahead and select ordinal. Let's go ahead and click on data type and see what our options are there. As you've seen in our data file, those response options are each associated with a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And those are integers. So we're going to select integer as a data type. Okay, question 2 is now set up. If we want to move to the next variable, we can just use this arrow key. Take a look down at the data spreadsheet. You can see that for question 2, now that we've set up the variable labels, they're actually displayed in the data set. You'll want to set up questions 3 through 11 in exactly the same way. So go ahead and do that. Here I am at question 12. This is the question about the respondent's age. And this particular question doesn't need value labels because ages like 22, for example, are interpreted just by looking at the number listed. 22 equals 22 years old. So we don't need to set up any value labels. However, let's make sure we have the right measurement type and data type selected. So let's remind ourselves of the options for measurement type. Remember, there are really 4 different measurement scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. And I mentioned to you that interval scales and ratio scales are both classified as continuous in Jamovi. Age is measured on a ratio level scale, so we're going to select continuous. By the way, the option ID we would just use for an ID variable, kind of like that very first variable that we have in our data set. You can see that when we changed the measurement type to continuous, Jamovi took away the option to add value labels. That said, we can add a quick description. This was a variable regarding age. And let's not forget data type. Again, we have integers listed, so we'll list integer. So follow your instructions and go through the remaining variables and set them all up. Let me show you a couple quick tips and tricks for how to navigate Jamovi. Remember, we can use these arrows to move from one variable to the next. When you're done setting up the variables, you can click this arrow right here and it'll hide that frame. If you have to get back to that setup option, just click on Setup from the data menu and you'll be right back there. Another way to open up that setup frame is to double-click on one of the variables. So navigation within Jamovi is really very easy. Through the magic of video editing, my variables are now all set up. But remember, it's really easy. To get into a variable, just double-click. You can enter a description for the variable. You can modify the measurement type. You can add levels if necessary, if appropriate. And always make sure that you're careful when you're working in here because that's our data and you don't want to change it. All right, now we're ready for the fun part. Now we're ready to run some data analyses. And generally speaking, I think we're going to be able to get everything that we need in one data run. Let me show you what I mean. The primary thing that we're going to need are frequency distribution tables. That way, we'll be able to see for each variable the percentage of respondents who selected each option. So everything that we're going to need we'll find in the Analyses tab. Once you activate the Analyses tab, then click on Exploration. And from the Exploration menu, then click on Descriptives. This will be the basic way that we get descriptive statistics. You'll notice that when you select an analysis to perform, Jamovi already gets started printing the results. And the nice thing about a Jamovi file is that it saves your data and the analyses and the results all within that same file. So, for example, if I wanted to go back and look at my data, I can click on the Data tab. But then, when I'm ready to work on these analyses again, I can just click on them in the results window, and the options for running that analysis will appear. All right, Jamovi wants to know which variables we want to analyze, and we want to analyze all those variables except for ID. So you can click on a variable and then move it over, or you can click, and then I like to scroll down. I hit my Shift key, I hit the last variable, and it will then highlight the entire block. And then I can use this arrow to move over all those variables into this window, identifying the variables for the analysis. Again, you can see when you look to the right, Jamovi is running the analyses as we're selecting them. That's one really powerful, really neat thing about Jamovi. I mentioned that we want frequency tables, so let's come down right over here and check that. And just like magic, Jamovi produces frequency distribution tables for each variable. Take a look right here at this table of basic descriptive statistics. You can see that each variable is going across the top in the columns, and then along the rows to the side, we have the N. We can see if there's any missing data. We know the mean, the median, the standard deviation, and so forth. But you see how that table is kind of hard to read because we have so many different variables. So here's what I suggest. To make the table easier to read, right over here, switch from variables across columns to the option where the variables will be listed across the rows. And bam, just like that, Jamovi makes the change. And that table is so much easier to read. Let's find out what statistics options are available to us. As I scroll down, I can see the default options are already selected. And generally speaking, the default options are good. But to those measures of central tendency, the mean and the median, let's also add the mode. And if you were paying attention to the right, in the results window, you can see that another column was just added showing the mode. Let's just take a real quick look at the results. We can see for each one of the questions, we know the mean, the median, the mode, the standard deviation, the minimum value, the maximum value, just some basic descriptive statistics. And then for each variable, we have a frequency distribution table. So we've got a lot of information right there with just some really simple analyses. And for now, those are all the statistics that we need. If we want to get rid of these analysis options, we can use this arrow to hide them. And then we're back to our data view. But again, if I wanted to make any changes to these analyses, all I need to do is click, and then those options reappear. Now, check this out. This might be something that you find helpful. When we look at these tables here, it's kind of hard to distinguish between the different variables, particularly because we left them as labeled Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And we're doing that just so that everybody in the class has everything set up in the same way. To make it easier to distinguish between these different tables, we can edit the output and add some labels to each table. So go ahead and click on the Edit menu. And when you click on the Edit menu, you see these areas are highlighted. And if you click, you can then type in whatever you'd like. So with my example data right here, question 2 represented anxiety and stress when completing an exam. So I'm going to add a label, anxiety/stress when completing an exam. It's that easy. And then to add other edits, you can just scroll down, and if you just hover, you'll see those sections are highlighted as you hover over them. Then just click, and then you can type in anything that you'd like. All right, we've moved pretty far through the instructions, and we're at this point right here. Now that our frequency distribution tables look pretty, we can export the results so that it's more easily to view them outside of Jamovi. Let me show you how to do that. If you're still in the edit mode, I recommend clicking over to analyses or data so that we can work in this menu without Jamovi thinking we're trying to change it. Now, go ahead and right-click anywhere in this window. We want to export all of our results into a PDF file. So go up to where it says All, and then select Export. Now, browse and find a safe place on your computer's hard drive to save this file. And I recommend that you save this PDF file using this name, Psych2120 Project 1 Analyses. And at that point, you can click on Export. I already had a file with that name, so Jamovi is just asking me if I want to overwrite that file, and in this case, I do. This is the file right here that I just exported. I'm going to double click on that and see how it looks. As you can see, the file looks great. Because it's a PDF file, you can take it anywhere and open it on almost any device. To complete the rest of the assignment, just follow your instructions and don't forget to save your Jamovi file. Click on the hamburger menu, click on Save, and that's all there is to it. All right, everybody, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed playing with Jamovi. I'll see you in the next video.